So welcome everybody. Keep joining us. Come on in. Keep joining us. We have a great talk, and I'll tell you what, if you've ever tried to call someone and they didn't answer their cell phone, and then they didn't answer it, and they didn't answer it, you know that panicky feeling inside, right? And the first thing you want is grab them and say, why have a cell phone if you don't answer it? You know what that feeling is when you can't get in touch with someone, and maybe it's just something ordinary. It's just nothing big, just, hey, I want you to pick us up on the way home. It's not that what you have to say to them is that vital. It is just a matter of why can't we communicate? And some of you I know are probably old enough like me to remember the days before cell phones. And if you called someone, they weren't home, no big deal. You would try the next day or whenever. And we're so used to instantaneous communication that when it's not there, we just, you can hit a panic button pretty easily. So we have friends from Florida and New York again. And Sharon experienced snow just yesterday. Yeah, we've had some odd weather in this part of the country too, believe it or not. Let's see, where are we with our time? So here's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm thinking I can get this in about a 30-minute time frame. Not going to be easy, but I think I can do it. And we're going to be talking about some of the traditional forms of communication. Hey there, Michigan, another Michigan person. We're going to talk about when we think about emergency communication, pretty much everybody just immediately thinks ham radio. Oh, ham radio, and then you'll hear someone say, oh, if everything hits the fan, it doesn't matter if you have a license or not. Yeah, there's just who wants to wait until then while you're figuring out all those buttons and dials, right? But we're going to talk about ham radio and walkie-talkies, and then we're going to get into a little bit about shortwave radio. And then I want to spend some time also talking about ways to communicate in a crisis that relies less on like the hardware than different really smart strategies. Whoever would have thought of using something like Snapchat, to get messages to loved ones. And so I think some of the things that we're going to talk about are pretty creative and, maybe a little bit out of the box. But I can't wait. And so as I'm seeing here people join, we have a couple people from Survival Mom Sisterhood, which, by the way, is open for new members. And you can just go to survivalmomsisterhood.com and read all about it. I tell people it's not just like a bunch of lessons. I mean, who wants to watch video lessons all day, every day? Tons of interaction. In fact, we just added a brand new workshop this coming Saturday with a kitchen coach, and she's going to teach us how to make meals without a recipe. And so we're all about just being very, very welcoming. We have men who are in the group. We have all ages of women, and I think I'll have time to talk about it a little bit later, but definitely the membership is open. And if training like this is like, I just need a little more training, I can read all these articles online, I can go to all these blogs, but putting it all together where it makes sense for me in my home, we don't have as much space or money, or we have a bunch of kids, or I'm an empty nester, whatever, you belong in Survival Mom Sisterhood, because we have members who are just like you, just exactly like you. And we have new mentoring groups starting in a few weeks. And that's where we break it down even into smaller groups, more personalized attention. So I think I will go ahead and get started. As I'm looking over in comments, for some reason, StreamYard doesn't really show me very many names. So if you want to, you can say, hello from Arizona, this is Lisa, or this is Katie, or whatever, and that can just help me just add a little bit of identity to what our conversation is about. So I'm going to pull up my notes, and I do have quite a few notes. I'm using my husband's system here. Hold on a second, where he has he has 3 screens going at any given time, and I'm just not quite used to that. So we're going to talk about different kinds of just the traditional forms of staying in touch with people. And then we're going to talk about maybe some non-traditional. So I'm just kind of looking for a way to kind of close this. And I want to make this smaller. Bear with me just for a second so I can get on my notes. I can close this window, And I can make my notes smaller so I can see your comments, and then I can see myself, because I don't want you to watch me looking down at my notes the whole entire time. All right, we have 20 people. The nice thing is that within the Facebook group, Survival Mom Bootcamp, that is, this is going to be available as a video replay. And I promised people in my email newsletter group that I would be sending them a separate link. So I will get that going. Hopefully I can get that out tomorrow. So when it comes to emergency communication, it is so important to get accurate information, to know where loved ones are. And I mentioned before, when someone doesn't pick up a cell phone anymore, it's just natural for us just to get a little bit nervous. It's like, where are they? But here, and this is a story I think I've relayed a couple of times, we live where there was some extreme Hurricane Harvey flooding. And I mean extreme, where not very far from us, there was water up to the roof lines of hundreds and thousands of houses and buildings and businesses. So I remember hearing in that whole turmoil and that tumultuous time of one of the drownings. And it was a law enforcement officer who had just taken a wrong turn. And he did not know that he would find himself in an overwhelming amount of water with no way to get out. And sadly, he drowned. And you would think this person is law enforcement. They have their, their radio. They're in touch with a lot of people. I am telling you, in a time like that, where there is a major emergency going on, maybe it could be a wildfire, or maybe it is some kind of a neighborhood situation where people are having to get out of their homes fast, maybe due to a chemical spill or some dangerous fumes. Information, accurate information, is really hard to come by. And that is one reason to have a plan to stay in touch, both for incoming information, but then also you getting information out. So if you have survived a tornado, for example, you need to let people know where you are. They need to know, hey, we're over here, we're in a shelter, but there's a bunch of rubble on top of us, come and find us. So there's no more critical time to stay in touch than in times of an emergency like these. Friends and families letting first responders know where you are, and then anybody else, volunteers or whatever, who are involved in recovery. So we're going to talk about some methods, and I mentioned ham, shortwave, walkie-talkies, cell phone, and social media. And then I'm going to finish by asking you just 2 or 3 questions that will help you leave the class today and then go do something. Okay, whether it's adding an app to your phone or whether it's researching walkie-talkies or ham radios, whatever. So this was such a big area. We're only going to spend about 35 minutes on this today, but it was such a big area that inside Surround Mom Sisterhood, we had to create an entire course with about 8 or 9 or 10 different lessons, a lesson about ham, a lesson about shortwave, a lesson about walkie-talkies, and then some even creative things like coming up with secret signals and codes, for people in your inner circle. So that is there. And as I mentioned before, Surround Mom Sisterhood, you can just go and type that in, is open to new members. So let's focus in on ham radio, because when we start talking about this kind of emergency communication, it's always the first thing that's brought up. So let's talk about some pros and cons. And basically for all of these different methods, I'll be sharing pros and cons, because some of these may be very suitable for you and you think, oh yes, we're gonna start doing that as a family or as an individual. But I want you to also know some of the drawbacks as we go. So the advantage of ham radio is that it doesn't rely on the internet. As some of these other strategies that we're going to talk about, they will rely on having an active and internet system. There are portable units for getting started that are inexpensive. For less than $100, you can get a ham radio. So when it came time for me to buy them for my family, I bought one per person, and the price point was very reasonable. And those are introductory. I understand that it can cost hundreds, it can cost thousands of dollars, to get a really good setup. But for dipping your toes into something and just kind of starting to learn about it, getting your ham radio license, a small and expensive Baofeng is going to be fine. And you can read reviews on some of the different models, both on Amazon as well as on different websites. Another advantage is that there are ham radio groups around the country, and they love new members. So when I was researching my book several years ago, I got in touch with a couple of these guys, and they could have talked to me for 48 hours nonstop. They just loved it. And so you can just Google the name of your city or the name of the nearest big town or whatever, and then ham radio group, and you should be able to find one close by. And also, they a lot of times they meet really frequently, like every week or so. With a ham radio and with some of the techniques that you learn about, you can transmit hundreds or thousands of miles away. In fact, there is a schedule out there where you can actually listen to transmissions from the International Space Station. So it's just, you have to know, first of all, how to use your own radio, and then how to tune into the different frequencies. And then there are different strategies to connect with people who are further away. It disadvantages, if you're thinking about this, the learning curve. It really is not like a Zello phone app where you just push a button and you start talking. So the learning curve is going to be a little ways up there. You need to know when you can get the best transmission, both incoming and outgoing. You need to know you can preset different channels on your radio, but you need to know how to do that. It's not something that you just, put a battery in and you can start using immediately. So it does take some training and some practice as well. You also want to learn amateur radio protocols. So you don't just get on and just start chatting with people as you start hearing random voices. Okay, that would be rude. I mean, that would be no different than walking up to someone seated at a restaurant and then sitting down and just welcoming yourself and then start talking and having a conversation. So you do need to understand what those protocols are. And as I said, kind of dip your toes in a little bit at a time. Learn how to use your gear. Learn how to use repeaters. And it's those repeaters that are the key to transmitting long distances. And also keep in mind, your communications, they're not private. So as you're talking to someone on using your ham radio and they're on theirs, someone who happens upon the same frequency channel, whatever that you are on, they can listen in. And that's when in the Survival Mom Sisterhood Communications course, that's one of the reasons why we talk about using different names and having some code words, a word that indicates, your house. Instead of saying, we're home, or, or I'm coming down, Highway 59, have some different code words. So someone listening in isn't going to be able to follow you home, or maybe to find your house and find you. So in a catastrophic scenario, you can think about like an EMP, magnetic pulse. Modern day ham radio equipment, amateur radio, it would probably be affected. So you can store one in a Faraday container. You can find instructions for that on my website, thesurvivalmom.com. And then some ham experts I talked to said that even the old vacuum tube systems, there was some disagreement. Some people thought that the vacuum tubes would survive something like an EMP, and others said no, they wouldn't. So that would be a catastrophic failure, in which case you're going to want to have some other methods. You can take an online class. Hamradioprep.com is just one of them. But the way that I easily pass the test, and I am not as technologically advanced as my husband, who was a master electrician, so he caught on fast. I studied mostly the online test questions. And we took a class, an in-person class. But what helped me the most is kind of hone in on what the test was really going to be about, and kind of filter out some of the information that might be helpful but wasn't part of the test. I really needed that. I just found on my phone an app, and there are several different apps that have the test questions, ham radio test questions. You can just look for that. Also on my website, there are other articles on just ordinary people like you and me getting their license. So there are a lot of other options for communicating, and a ham radio is not just the only thing. The other one is a shortwave radio, another very low cost piece of communications hardware. Shortwave had its heyday many years ago, with lots of people setting up just their own shortwave radio station out in their garage or out in a spare room or something, and those little stations just proliferated. But over time, with the internet and with our cell phones, we can just send messages in an instant. We don't have to get on a shortwave radio and then have set stations that we kind of can communicate with at different times of day. No, the internet really changed things for shortwave. But over on Twitter and on Facebook, you can type in shortwave radio and you can find people who are still active, and you can read different, ways of getting in touch with different stations and so on, some of the technology that's involved. I also noticed that with the Russian and Ukrainian war, some people in the war zone are relying on shortwave to get information. So the pro advantage, you can pick up live shortwave radio transmissions from the other side of the world. So we've done that right here in this office, places in South America, places over in Europe. It was easy to do. It's fun. It's very inexpensive, as I mentioned. And some emergency radios come with a shortwave band. So before you go out and buy a separate shortwave radio, take a look at your emergency radio that you might already have. Probably has a hand crank and maybe it has a flashlight attached to it or something like that. And see if it has a shortwave band, in which case you can start playing around with it. You will need some kind of an antenna, and they sell those on Amazon. I'm sure they sell those in, in some of the different stores where you can buy radio supplies. Maybe, I haven't checked, but maybe places like Best Buy. You can also check websites online. I know some of the brands of shortwave radios, they will have an online store. Disadvantage, there are a lot fewer stations now with the internet. Pretty much it's you can only find things at night, and a lot of the stations are in foreign languages. And again, I mentioned you'll be needing an antenna. So that's the world of shortwave radio. The advantage of having one of those, if there was ever an information blackout. So let's say that you are right in the middle of a place in the country, a place in the world where there's been a huge crisis, like this Ukrainian-Russian war, right? And maybe the internet has been taken down on purpose. Cell phone towers have been disabled on purpose. There is a chance that at least with shortwave radio, you could get information what's going on in the outside world. So unless you are able to set up your own radio station with the shortwave bands, you won't be able to transmit, but you'll be able to get information. Another form is walkie-talkies. I love walkie-talkies. We've had walkie-talkies for years. They are very useful, but have limited use. So a lot of times when you read the packaging or you read the ad or you read on Amazon, hey, it has a 10-mile distance, and you start thinking, wow, that'd be perfect. No, they're inexpensive, which is an advantage. They're very portable, which is an advantage. They can be, have like a charging base, which is great. You can just take them off and now it's cordless. However, one of the disadvantages is that they're going to only work over much of a distance when there is nothing, no interference. So buildings, mountains, maybe trees can be enough of an interference where your walkie-talkie is not going to work. Okay. The advantage, they can pick up anywhere. Pick up. You can buy them anywhere. You can buy them from, again, Best Buy. You can buy them online, lots of different places, of course, and Amazon. They're not very expensive. You can just keep it in your pocket or your purse. They're lightweight. And they can transmit over a distance, but only if there's not much interference. I see this as being useful for people who live in a rural setting. And so maybe if you live on acreage and you want to get in touch with someone on the back 40, for example, maybe someone's out there doing some work and you want to get in touch with them, that's handy. So in a situation like that, it's helpful, useful if you're traveling with other vehicles and you want to have a non-internet based form of communication. A walkie-talkie could be it, but you can count on them never transmitting as far as they're advertised. So I'm going to leave you with a couple questions before we go into our next segment. How far do you perceive or predict? How far do you predict you will need to communicate? So our daughter is about 3 hours away. A walkie-talkie is not going to cut it. All right. We can use different phone apps and social media, which I'm going to get into next. Ham radio and social media phone apps would be how we would get in touch with her. And then the second question, so the first one is how far do you think you're going to need to communicate? And that's going to determine what you're going to buy, practice using, and then put into a comprehensive communication plan for your loved one. Second, what power sources are you going to need to have on hand? Recently, I read about a dad's plan for staying in touch with his kids if everything hit the fan. So they go to school, but they're some distance away. All right. They walk home, but it's not like it's just a couple of blocks. So he told them to take a path that would lead them through a much more rural area. He described it as the woods, and to stay there for X number of minutes or hours. And this is a complete plan that the family has. So I was thinking about that, and I thought, well, kids, let's say they're fourth, fifth, sixth grade. Okay, so by that time, they're pretty competent. They can remember what their parents have said. Maybe they have a few things in their backpack, like a flashlight, maybe a little miniature first aid kit, maybe a bottle of water, a little snack. But I started to wonder, what if they have a cell phone, what happens when that cell phone dies? Because as we're going to see in a minute, your cell phone can be a literal lifeline to safety. So you might want to add to maybe your kid's keychain, or maybe something inside their backpack, grandkid or whatever, just one of those little digital clock. Because I started to think, if they're told to stay in this safe area in the woods for X, he said 6 hours, which is a long time. But I guess 6 hours he thought was going to give him time to get things situated at home, make sure he has things in order. His kids have been well trained. They're smart. They're savvy. If I don't show up within 6 hours, but 6 hours, a phone could die, depending. So maybe a little digital clock. Little digital, I know I've seen these before. So it's just something you could put, tuck inside on a keychain or tuck inside a little pocket, where it would have a much longer lasting battery life than a cell phone. So let's move into utilizing social media. I know that for a lot of us, social media is something to not be a big part of, partly because of privacy, partly because it consumes time, but you can use it strategically. And I believe in using every tool at your disposal. And that would include Facebook. That would include Twitter. So that would include some of these social media entities that maybe you've avoided because you just didn't want to be a part of it. It had to be, it's a time waster. But if it helps you, and if you can exploit it for your purposes, and right now our purpose is staying in touch with loved ones, no matter what, then that's a good reason to be on some of these social media. So here are a couple of tips. Number one, set up a secret Facebook group known only to you and the people you invite. You can do this on MeWe. You can do it on Gab. Are there other social media outlets out there that allow you just to set up a private secret group? No one can see the group exists, and no one can see who's in the group. So imagine for a second that there's a wildfire, and your parents or other close loved ones or friends, they are on the other side of that wildfire, and maybe cell phone towers are down. An easy way to get in touch is just to jump into that secret Facebook group. How are you? Can we meet you anywhere? Do you need anything? Are you going to evacuate? Maybe you could even do some research if they're needing, hey, we need to find a place where we can drop off the animals, or can you find a hotel for us to stay at? So really important information, and you need to be really timely with that. And so social media groups will do that. And then also, I understand nextdoor.com, you have to use your real name, okay, which kind of stinks. But I also am active in 3 or 4 other very local Facebook groups. And there's even a local forum that is not Facebook, that isn't related to Facebook in any way. So it's a great place to find out, why are all these helicopters hovering over the HEB shopping center? Or, hey, everybody, there's a tree down on Maple Lane. And where else are you going to get that kind of super local information? So by all means, become a part of local Facebook groups. You can set up a Facebook identity that with a kind of like a throwaway email address, and you can still be on Facebook, and you can utilize it, again, exploit for your purposes. Twitter, same thing. On Twitter, follow local weather and local news channels, local law enforcement, local government entities. So during the whole COVID thing, always on Twitter, always on Facebook, the sheriff's department or whatever, they would be putting out, hey, this is the latest news regarding COVID. Okay, these are changes or updates or whatever. And again, Twitter, sign up under some other screen name. Doesn't have to be, Lisa Bedford. You can sign up under another screen name, and you can follow your very close circle of loved ones. Everyone has a fake screen name. And you could also even have coded messages. If you've read the book or heard about the book Alas Babylon, well, Alas Babylon, that phrase was going to be sort of the shit just hit the fan warning to everybody, in the family group. If I call and I say, Alas Babylon, or I fit that into, our conversation, that's your warning. That's your warning that it's all hit the fan and you need to follow the plan that we've set as a family. So maybe have coded messages, come up with something that only your group would understand. Put it out on Twitter. Put the same thing out in your secret Facebook group. And I'm going to give you a few ways now to utilize your smartphone to do the same type of thing. I know that when we start thinking about EMP, electromagnetic pulse, and all that, that's like the granddaddy of all worst case scenarios. But you can protect phones, inside a Faraday container. But if something like that would happen, again, catastrophic, widespread, but also on the range of likelihoods, probably not all that likely. So I still believe in utilizing my smartphone. I have an Android, my smartphone for all different kinds of purposes besides just calling. So one, if you have not explored the world of Zello, Zello, and Hurricane Harvey, that's how I first learned about it. I became a little Zello operator, and I was telling different groups, rescue people, where to go. And people would chime in and say, hey, we can deliver these emergency goods, or I have, 50 bags of ice, where do you want me to deliver those? And so Zello is a free app. They also have a paid version, but you don't need the paid version. The free app, and you can set up your family's own, or your own personal channel on Zello. In fact, Survival Mom Sisterhood members, we have our own Zello channel. And actually we were talking just last night in one of our group calls about kind of getting it reactivated. So like every Monday morning or every certain time of, once a week or once a month, we can all check in with each other just in case, Other things, Snapchat. When my son was overseas for a year, I discovered in our first cell phone call, that I didn't really want to spend $118 again to talk to him for an hour. So we used Snapchat. And it was an easy way to do just a video conversation, free and super easy to use. Skype is another one. Marco Polo. Marco Polo allows you to record messages. Now, that would come in handy. Think about this just for a second. Let's say that something, everything's hit the fan, and you have, enough battery and you have enough bandwidth with the cell phone towers, etc. You could get on Marco Polo, and you could record maybe a pretty important message. So this highway is open, this bridge is closed, and I'm going to keep updating my Marco Polo messages, until we all get together, all right, at our, our location, meetup location. So Marco Polo will let you record. Snapchat and Skype will let you have the two-way conversation, and they can both be important. Signal for text messaging, and then Telegram. Now, Telegram first came on the scene as a super safe, hyper safe way to communicate online. Don't worry about, your messages, being viewed by anybody, or they're not, being saved anywhere. And it turns out that Telegram is not really as secure as we were all led to believe. However, Telegram does let you create channels or groups. So if you have a mom, if you have two sisters, if you have a nephew, you have a couple of adult kids, whatever, you can all join the same Telegram channel. And I would just say, apply the same rules that we talked about using a ham radio. Assume that people are listening. In fact, on all of these, just assume people are listening. And that's where you want to have some things maybe in writing. Everyone has a copy of a plan. First, we check out the Facebook group. Then we look on Twitter for any more up-to-date messages. Then we get on Signal. Then we check Marco Polo for Lisa's or whoever's, recorded information, because she's trying to keep up with, the latest. So the Telegram app will have its uses. So I believe in, again, using technology to provide that communication. You know, why be afraid and think that there's no way to communicate? My husband is working downtown. He's an hour and a half away. His cell phone's not working. I'm scared. All totally legitimate. But you don't have to stay stuck right there. All right. So your husband, I'm going to use that as an example, could have a ham radio in a very thick Mylar bag. There are like EM-proof bags made out of different kinds of materials. He could just have that as part of his, you know, in his work truck or in part of his desk or whatever. So have these 3 or 4 or 5 of these different methods to staying in touch. For email, another tip, if you haven't done this already, create a Proton Mail, Proton, P-R-O-T-O-N mail, Proton Mail email account. You could set up one for the whole family. And its purpose would be for example, if I want to get some written instructions to my group, I could just email them to that Proton account, and anybody who can log in can see it. All right. Or different members have their own Proton email account. But one thing you can do, and I know this is not like top secret or anything, but you can write an email, or you can put an attachment to an email, let's say a map to something or a shopping list or a to-do list, you know, attach it to an email and then just never send it. So anybody with a login information can just log in, and they can go to drafts and they can read what you said, and it really never goes out into the ether. It's just stuck right there. Is that, I mean, if someone really wanted to track you down and track all of your communications, oh, I'm sure that they can find that. But for the everyday person, it's pretty secure. All right. So the draft messages is something else. So here is your assignment. I've given you a lot of different things to think about, from ham radio, shortwave, walkie-talkies, the Zello app, ways to use your phone, ways to use social media, and ways to even use email. All right. When I'm done, and I'm going to be finished here in about 2 minutes, I want you to take an action with something, just something. You know, add one of these apps to your smartphone, or download Zello and figure out how to use it. There's a little bit of a learning curve to Zello. You should have been there. On the Stride Mom Sisterhood, we had like a big tutorial all together, about 20 or 30 of us trying at the same time to all learning Zello on Androids and Apples. It was fun, but we figured it out in the end. But just one thing that I've talked about today, something that would help give you peace of mind, because I don't want you fretting. I don't want you, you know, fighting back tears because you can't get in touch with someone you love. All right. And so you have a whole array of tools. The one thing I didn't add were carrier pigeons. Slightly joking there. I had a friend who lived near Austin, and they actually raised carrier pigeons. And one time she won enough money in a carrier pigeon race to go out and pay cash for some big old luxury SUV. So that's an option, okay? But you have a lot of tools right here. If nothing else, go create a Proton Mail account, and maybe share some of your, maybe share the login with, you know, the people that are closest to you that you trust absolutely. So a couple things, boy, it's a big topic. It is a big topic, and you are welcome, because I want to, my life is just like right here at ground level. So I don't even pretend to be one of these bushcrafting experts who lives up in Idaho or way out in the middle of, you know, New Mexico desert or something. And no, I'm like probably all of you, most of you. And so we need solutions that are practical, things that we can do, because if you're staying in touch with your loved ones via some of these strategies, then that gives you peace of mind to do other things. So let's say that everything did hit the fan. If your fear level is so high that your brain is freezing, or you're snapping at everybody in the house because of that fight response, right? That fight reflex. This having peace of mind and say, okay, I know my husband's coming home. He just used, you know, our code words to let me know he's 5 miles away and he's walking, but he's okay. Huh, all right, well, now I can pay attention to other things. But when your brain freezes up, oh my gosh, that is not a good thing. So this kind of training, practical and hands-on, designed for just everyday people. It's part of Survival Mom Sisterhood. And Everybody's invited. I don't know that I don't think we've ever turned anyone away. I don't even know why we would. But for the introvert, the person who says, I just want to come in, I just want to learn. For the introvert, we have a huge library of videos very similar to this one on topics like homesteading and foraging and making tinctures and putting together a medical kit, the huge array of topics. In fact, if any of my Survival Mom Sisterhood members are watching us right now, over in the comments, tell us one thing or one or two things that you value most about your membership. So, if you say, I learn best when I'm on my own. We will leave you alone if that's what you want. But we also get together about once a week, sometimes twice a week for different purposes. So I have a training on how to use the website, training on how to use our online, it's exclusive, my online prepping planner. The only way you can have access to it is as a member. And I teach you how to do that. As I mentioned earlier, we have special events like this coming Saturday morning. We have a professional kitchen coach who's going to teach us how to cook without using a recipe. And I think that's important because when you think about your food storage, what if everything hits the fan and all you have is just boxes and cans of stuff and it's like, now what do I do? So you want to have some cooking skills, maybe things you've never thought of before. That's coming up. So for the extrovert, we have it. For the introvert, for the beginner, we have our mentoring groups. For our more advanced prepping women, we also have our mentoring groups. And so there's a lot there, but you would be so welcome. And if you're watching this, you would fit in. You would fit in just fine. And I just wanted to invite you to check it out because I think when you take on a heavy topic like this, today we've been keeping it light, but it's actually a heavy topic, isn't it? Because it's so emotional. It just sits right here, doesn't it? You think, I don't have anyone I can talk to about this. Even my husband or my kids think I'm nuts. So you don't need to go down the road alone. And so survivalmomsisterhood.com will give you a page that has all the information. The pricing, it's $37 a month, which is a little over $1 a day. And I priced it there because $1 a day, most of my courses are $27, $37 for just one course. And so this is a whole array of activities and training and interaction. Any other questions over in the comments? It looks like I went over my 30 minutes just by a little bit. Anything else? Thank you so much for keeping it real and simple. Yep, that's what I'm all about. I've done this for 11, 12 years now as the survival mom. And so it always comes from the heart, everything I do. Okay, I am going to end the broadcast. This video is going to become part of the video library in the Survival Mom Bootcamp group. If you are watching this outside of Facebook, it's because I sent you a separate link. And if you have questions, feel free to email me. And I'm just so pleased to do this. As far as the bootcamp group goes, and by the time you watch this announcement may be over. But remember, we're doing our bootcamp, Survival Mom Bootcamp membership drive. First time I've ever done this, a membership drive, and keep inviting people, especially people that you think you would have in your communications plan. All right. So if you think, I want to get my grandma on this, or I want to get my aunt, invite them. In fact, when you invite them, tell them what this is all about and why you're inviting them. So, and they have to give your name for you to get a point. All right. You are welcome. You are welcome. And I have really had fun this afternoon. Take care, everybody. And I will be back in the Facebook group a little bit later today or tomorrow. See you then.